Welcome to the Nifty Noon podcast.
Glad to be here for this one because, man, what a week.
Seriously, I mean, imagine watching $13 billion just evaporate into thin air over a single weekend.
Right. Poof. Gone.
Yeah, completely gone. And yet the broader financial market doesn't even blink. It's wild. So today, our mission is to help you, the listener, make sense of a truly chaotic week in the world of crypto.
And it was chaos. I mean, we are looking at an absolute masterclass in the extreme highs and, frankly, the terrifying lows of decentralized finance.
All crammed into just a few days. So let me give you the TLDR of the week's dominant themes. We kicked things off with a massive $292 million DeFi bridge heist.
Which is just a staggering number to wake up to.
It really is. And that single event triggered a $13 billion liquidity crunch across the whole ecosystem.
Yeah.
But then, abruptly contrasting with that on-chain panic, we saw these massive, undeniable leaps in mainstream stablecoin adoption.
Yeah, by traditional corporate giants, no less.
Exactly. And finally, the week culminated in a $3.4 billion regulatory turf war that's basically positioned to redefine the future of event-based trading in the U.S.
A lot of ground to cover.
A ton of ground. And just a quick note, all of our insights for this deep dive today are pulled chronologically from the daily April 2026 dispatches of our newsletter, Nifty Noon. Okay, let's unpack this, starting with the trigger on Monday, April 20th. The Kelp DAO exploit.
Yeah, so to really understand the sheer scale of this, the $292 million drained from Kelp DAO, we have to look under the hood of cross-chain bridges.
Right, the infrastructure that actually lets different blockchains talk to each other.
Exactly. They transfer the assets back and forth. Now, the Kelp DAO bridge runs on Layer 0 infrastructure, and the attackers, which, by the way, security firms widely suspect to be the North Korean Lazarus Group.
Always the usual suspects with these massive numbers.
Always. But they didn't just, guess a password or something. They ruthlessly exploited a fundamental architectural flaw in how the bridge verified truth.
Yeah, and the sources in our newsletter highlight that this specific bridge relied on something called a one-of-one decentralized verifier network, or a DVN.
Right.
And I gotta say, even to a casual observer, putting the phrase one of one next to the word decentralized just sounds like a massive contradiction.
Oh, it is a massive contradiction. I mean, a one-of-one configuration means there's only a single validator required to cryptographically sign a transaction.
So just one entity declaring it legitimate.
Just one. The whole point of blockchain is distributed consensus, right? But here, the bridge developers basically bottlenecked all their security into one single gatekeeper.
Wow.
And the attacker recognized this single point of failure right away. They weaponized the bridge's own communication system by manipulating the RPC nodes.
Okay, let's break down that mechanism for you really quick. An RPC node, a remote procedure call node, is essentially just the server that reads and writes data to the blockchain.
Right, it's the messenger.
Yeah, it's how the verifier checks if something actually happened on the source chain. So it's like, think of it like a bouncer letting someone into a VIP club because they showed a fake screenshot of a text message, but the bouncer never actually checks the master guest list.
That's a perfect analogy.
Yeah.
Because the attacker compromised that RPC data feed, right? They fed the single verifier false information.
The fake text message.
Exactly. And pushed through what security researchers call a phantom packet.
And a packet is just a payload of cross-chain data, right?
Yeah. In a normal transaction, you lock your tokens on chain A, and a packet tells chain B to mint the equivalent tokens. But this phantom packet was completely forged.
Unbelievable.
It told the Ethereum mainnet to release 116,500 Ethereum, which, just for context, is liquid restaked Ethereum. It's a yield-bearing receipt you get for staking ETH.
Right.
But the attacker never actually locked up a single token on the source chain, which was a unichain. They just conjured millions out of thin air because that one verifier rubber-stamped a forged message.
Which goes back to my bouncer analogy. Relying on a one-of-one DVN is like relying on a single corrupt notary public who works in a back room somewhere and just never double-checks the original documents before applying their official stamp.
Yep. And if that notary is compromised, the entire legal foundation just collapses.
Right. We need the blockchain equivalent of, like, a dual-key nuclear missile silo, where multiple independent actors have to physically turn their keys at the exact same time to authorize the action.
Which brings up a huge issue. This raises an important question for the entire industry regarding our reliance on single points of failure in multi-chain architecture.
Because we spent, what, billions of dollars building this stuff?
billions of dollars.
Yeah.
Countless engineering hours building these incredibly complex interoperability layers. But if they ultimately rely on a one-of-one verification setup, the security is fundamentally brittle.
Yeah, it's basically useless.
Pretty much. Building redundant security like multi-verifier setups, where multiple independent entities running diverse client software actually have to reach consensus before a transfer is approved. That is absolutely vital for DeFi's next leg up.
Otherwise, we are engineering massive financial castles on sand.
Exactly.
And the collapse of that specific sandcastle spilled directly into Tuesday, April 21st, revealing this incredible contagion effect.
Oh, the fallout was brutal.
Because the attackers didn't just quietly walk away with their $292 million in forged rsETH, right? They took those stolen, unbacked tokens and marched straight into OVE.
Literally one of the largest decentralized lending markets in the entire world.
Yeah, and they deposited the fake rsETH as collateral to borrow real ETH.
Which, let's clarify ETH really quickly. It stands for Wrapped Ethereum. It's simply the ERC20 token standard version of native Ethereum, which just allows it to interact smoothly with smart contracts.
Right, so it's actual valuable Ethereum.
Yeah. And by depositing their phantom rsETH, the attackers leveraged an OVE's own automated systems against itself.
How so?
Well, Acave's pricing oracles saw the rsETH and just priced it at its normal market value. The system was completely unaware that the underlying tokens back on the Kelp bridge were totally unbacked.
So they just drained the protocol.
They drained massive pools of real ETH, injecting a catastrophic amount of bad debt right into the rsETH protocol.
And once legitimate depositors realized that the underlying collateral in the system was essentially counterfeit, the panic set in. I mean, it triggered a classic bank run, but executed at the speed of code.
People were terrified.
Right. Users rushed to withdraw their real ETH, but the liquidity pools had already been hollowed out by the attacker. And our sources at Nifty Noon noted that a hail of depositors who couldn't withdraw their ETH started aggressively borrowing stablecoins against their remaining assets.
Just to extract some kind of value. Anything they could get.
Exactly. And that secondary panic meant stablecoin depositors suddenly couldn't withdraw either. It just became a cascading, systemic freeze. 9 major DeFi protocols, including platforms like Sparkland, had to completely freeze their lending markets to stop the bleeding.
And the metric that really defines this chaos is TVL, or total value locked.
The total amount of capital sitting in DeFi smart contracts.
Right. And over a matter of days, TVL across all of decentralized finance plummeted from $99.4 billion down to $86.2 billion.
Over $13 billion was just wiped off the board.
Gone.
But I have to jump in with a theory here, because the numbers don't entirely add up to me on the surface. If the whole system just lost $13 billion in liquidity over a single weekend, why didn't the broader crypto market completely crater?
That's a great question.
Right. I was watching the charts, and Bitcoin actually stayed remarkably stable. It was hovering around like $75,000 to $78,000 all week.
It really didn't flinch.
So my read is that this wasn't a massive market sell-off where everyone just cashed out to fiat currency. This was people unplugging their money from the DeFi matrix and moving it back to self-custody cold wallets.
That is a highly accurate read of the market psychology. I mean, it demonstrates a level of maturation we simply wouldn't have seen during the contagion events of a few years ago.
Yeah, people didn't panic sell everything.
Right. That $13 billion drop was largely just capital flight to safety. Users saw the bridge exploit and immediately pulled their liquidity out of smart contracts, just out of an abundance of caution.
Makes sense.
Furthermore, the blue-chip DeFi tokens assets like AAVE, UNI, and Link, they held the line beautifully. Institutional algorithms and retail traders alike recognize that this was an infrastructure vulnerability specific to Kelp DAO's one-of-one DVN setup.
It wasn't a flaw in AVE itself.
Exactly. It wasn't a fundamental failure of AVE's core lending mathematics or the broader value proposition of decentralized finance.
And we also saw emergency guardrails actually work, which was cool. The Arbitrum Security Council stepped in, they coordinated with law enforcement, and used their emergency powers to freeze over 30,000 ETH on the Arbitrum One network that was traced directly to the exploiter.
Yeah, the ecosystem is learning brutally hard, highly expensive lessons in real time. We are witnessing a forced, painful evolution away from these vulnerable configurations.
Because the market just won't tolerate it anymore.
No, it will now demand robust, multi-verifier setups. This trial by fire hardening is basically the only way the system becomes resilient enough to handle trillions of dollars in the future.
Absolutely. Now, while the decentralized infrastructure was busy patching all these massive holes midweek, centralized stablecoin infrastructure was quietly pulling off one of the biggest utility pivots we've ever seen.
Oh, this was huge.
Which brings us to Wednesday, April 22nd. We got major news that Tempo, a blockchain infrastructure company incubated by Stripe and Paradigm, has officially brought traditional global enterprise workflows on-chain.
This is a monumental shift. I mean,
Sure.
we're no longer talking about niche crypto startups adopting blockchain. We are talking about traditional household business giants migrating their operations.
Yeah. DoorDash, Coastal Bank, and the massive Latin American fintech ARQ are now running their back-end payment operations on Tempo's stablecoin rails.
And they are doing this to completely bypass the legacy banking system.
Yeah, let's look at the mechanics of why. Traditional cross-border payments rely on correspondent banking. It's like this maze of Nostro and Vostro accounts where a payment from, say, a U.S. bank to a Mexican restaurant partner might bounce through 3 different intermediary banks.
And every single bank takes a cut.
Every single one takes a fee, and the settlement takes days.
Right.
But by moving to stablecoins, a cross-border transaction settles on a public blockchain in roughly 3 seconds, costing a fraction of a cent.
It fundamentally rewrites the overhead costs for global operations. Faster, cheaper, and perfectly predictable money movement is the absolute holy grail for corporate finance departments.
Yeah, and here's where it gets really interesting. Tempo didn't just provide the blockchain rails and walk away. According to our newsletter, they launch a dedicated stablecoin advisory unit.
Which is such a smart move.
Right. They are actively deploying engineers and strategic consultants into traditional businesses to basically hold their hands, integrate the APIs, and physically bridge Web 2 companies into Web 3 infrastructure.
And what's fascinating here is the narrative shift we are witnessing in real time. I mean, for the last decade, stablecoins were primarily viewed as a niche liquidity tool for crypto traders.
Yeah, just a safe haven to park your digital dollars between trading volatile tokens like Bitcoin or Solana.
Exactly. But what Tempo is proving, especially with the heavyweight backing of a payments juggernaut like Stripe, is that stablecoins have evolved way beyond trading. They are now a credible institution-grade settlement layer.
Wow.
And once CFOs realize they can shave millions off their operational overhead by utilizing this infrastructure, the adoption curve is going to go parabolic. It's a pure, undeniable utility play.
But, moving billions of dollars globally at the speed of light sounds amazing for a CFO, but it is absolutely guaranteed to attract the heavy hand of state actors.
100%.
You cannot move that kind of money without governments taking a very close, very critical look. Which brings us to the massive regulatory clash on Thursday, April 23rd.
Yeah, the scrutiny that has been building for months finally culminated in a legal bomb dropping directly onto the prediction market sector.
A huge bomb. New York Attorney General Letitia James launched a massive offensive, suing Coinbase for $2.2 billion and Gemini for $1.2 billion.
Massive numbers.
Yeah, and the core allegation from the state of New York is that the prediction markets operated by these platforms are fundamentally illegal, unlicensed gambling operations.
Right.
The AG's office is specifically arguing that because these platforms allow 18-year-olds to purchase shares on the outcomes of real-world events, they are actively bypassing New York's strict 21 and over laws for mobile sports betting.
Right. They see it as sports betting.
Exactly. Now, before we dive into the arguments, I want to be incredibly clear with you, the listener. We do not take sides in these political and regulatory battles. Our goal is strictly to report impartially on the legal arguments and facts presented in our sources from Nifty Noon.
And keeping that impartial lens is crucial because the legal arguments on both sides are deeply entrenched and rely on completely different interpretations of financial law.
Very different.
Yeah. The state views prediction markets, where users buy binary shares that resolve to either $1 or 0 depending on a future outcome, as a direct parallel to sports betting. Because it resembles betting, New York argues it requires state-level gaming licenses.
Which neither Coinbase nor Gemini actually acquired?
Right. The crypto industry, however, argues that the underlying mechanics classify these markets entirely differently.
Yeah, Paul Grewal, the chief legal officer at Coinbase, immediately published their legal counter-argument. The defense is that prediction markets are not games of chance. They are event-based commodity derivatives.
Which puts them in a totally different regulatory bucket.
Exactly. They argue they're federally regulated national exchanges that fall squarely under the jurisdiction of the Commodity Futures Trading Commission, the CFTC. So the industry's stance is that New York State is aggressively overstepping its bounds and interfering with federal regulatory territory.
It's a classic state versus federal clash.
It is. But here is my theory on the timing of this lawsuit. Polymarket, which is another dominant prediction platform, was reportedly in talks to raise funds at a $15 billion valuation this very same week.
Yeah, $15 billion.
It feels like the state sees the astronomical amount of capital flowing into these platforms and is throwing down a multi-billion-dollar roadblock to force compliance and likely a cut of the revenue before it gets too big to control.
Well, if we connect this to the bigger picture, this aggressive turf war in federal court might actually be exactly what the industry requires to reach its final form.
You think so?
I do. Because currently, prediction markets are operating in a massive, ambiguous, regulatory gray area in the United States. Are they state-regulated gambling? Are they federal commodity derivatives?
Nobody really knows for sure.
Right. The fact that New York has forced this issue into a high-stakes federal court battle means we are finally going to get a definitive, binding legal precedent.
Which is badly needed.
Yeah. The $15 billion valuation rumors for Polymarket prove that consumer demand for event-based trading is practically limitless. So this lawsuit is the crucible. It will force the ultimate regulatory clarity the U.S. desperately needs.
Because once the rules of engagement are clearly defined, like who regulates it, what the KYC requirements are, how it's taxed, the floodgates for institutional capital can truly open without fear of sudden enforcement action.
Exactly. It's painful now, but necessary for the long game.
Makes sense. So the collision of those regulatory demands on Thursday and the security vulnerabilities of decentralized bridges on Monday leads us to a fascinating climax. On Friday, April 24th, Tether decided to flex its centralized muscles in a way that directly addresses both the need for compliance and the dangers of illicit on-chain activity.
Oh yeah. Tether executed what is arguably their most significant and aggressive compliance action to date.
They coordinated directly with U.S. law enforcement and the Office of Foreign Assets Control, or OFAC. And together, they tracked and froze over $344 million in USDT sitting on the Tron network.
Just froze it entirely.
Yeah. They completely blacklisted two massive whale wallets that intelligence agencies tied directly to sanctions evasion and international criminal syndicates.
Wow.
And the mechanics of how they achieved this are critical. Tether utilized administrative keys baked directly into the USDT smart contract. They quite literally pushed a button, blacklisted the addresses, and instantly immobilized $344 million.
See, this action highlights a massive philosophical divide in crypto, but also a stark practical reality. I mean, think about Tether's swift, decisive, centralized action compared to the messy, helpless fallout of the Kelp DAO hack we explored earlier.
Right, night and day.
Exactly. In pure decentralized finance, the foundational ethos is code is law. There is no central authority. There is no admin key to pause a bridge or freeze a hacker's wallet.
Nobody to call when things go wrong.
Right. And that is exactly why the Kelp hacker could exploit a flaw, forge rsETH, crash the lending markets, and just walk away with nearly $300 billion without anyone being able to stop the transactions.
So what does this all mean? My read is that the DeFi purist dream, the idea of a totally permissionless, uncensorable financial layer, is officially dead if the goal is mainstream institutional adoption.
It's a tough pill to swallow for some.
It is. I mean, DeFi purists absolutely despise the existence of centralized wallet freezing. But if you are a massive enterprise like Stripe or DoorDash, you simply cannot legally operate on financial rails where sanctioned entities or North Korean hacking groups can move stolen funds freely without consequence.
You've isolated the core tension of the entire industry right there. From an institutional perspective, this proactive regulatory cooperation from Tether is the most bullish signal imaginable.
Oh, they love it.
They do. By demonstrating that they possess the architectural power and, the corporate willingness to work hand in glove with global law enforcement to sweep bad actors out of the network, Tether is proving that stablecoins can be a safe, cleanly regulated ecosystem.
A safe sandbox.
Exactly. It provides the centralized guarantee of safety that Fortune 500 companies require to enter the space.
So you essentially trade absolute decentralization for the safety and legal compliance required to actually onboard the rest of the world's economy.
It is the ultimate trade-off. And that tension perfectly synthesizes what truly mattered this week. If we filter out the noise, And the noise was the temporary panic over the $13 billion drop in TVL and all the sensationalist headlines. The true signal is the undeniable, forced maturation of the crypto space.
Maturation is a great word for it.
Yeah. The aggressive shift toward institution-grade stablecoin infrastructure with Tempo and Tether proves that the utility phase of crypto is finally here, and it's operating at scale. Simultaneously, catastrophic events like the Kelp DAO hack are the necessary trial by fire. They ruthlessly expose brittle one-of-one verification setups, forcing the entire developer ecosystem to transition to the safer, multi-verifier architectures required for the future.
Okay, so as we look ahead to next week, what should you, the listener, be keeping a close eye on? I'd say focus on two major storylines. First, watch how cross-chain bridge architecture adapts in the post-Kelp DAO era.
Definitely.
Pay attention to which protocols aggressively roll out redundant multi-verifier security and which ones stubbornly refuse to abandon their single points of failure. Second, keep a very close eye on the state versus federal showdown over prediction markets.
That is going to be huge.
Yeah, that courtroom battle between New York Attorney General Letitia James and Coinbase will set a legal precedent for event-based trading that will echo for decades.
And I want to leave you with the final lingering question to ponder as we wrap up this deep dive. We've clearly seen that the mainstream corporate success of stablecoins relies heavily on centralized entities retaining architectural kill switches to freeze funds and comply with global regulators.
Right.
If that absolute control is the strict prerequisite for global adoption, does the future of decentralized finance ultimately depend on an underlying foundation of total centralization?
Wow. That is a heavy, almost paradoxical thought to chew on. It's like demanding a completely trustless system, but only if there is a trusted entity holding a master override switch, just in case.
Exactly.
Well, thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. To stay ahead of all these narratives as they break daily and to keep exploring the mechanics behind the headlines, make sure you follow our newsletter, Nifty Noon, on X and Substack. Catch you next time.